All right, hey guys, how's it going? We're gonna go on with some more Skeletal System. Hopefully, you guys have been playing those the whack-a-bone thing. It's kind of fun, and you'll learn some of the bones. What we're gonna do is I'm gonna have you guys do probably next week, Monday or Tuesday. I'm gonna give you a little quiz over those bones. So. Um, We'll see how you do. So really play that if you're bored and I want to mess around. Play that a little bit, and you'll get it easy. So we'll go on here. We were talking about functions of skeletal system. We went through those. Um, so we're gonna just kind of pick up where we left off. Okay, so two major skeletal system parts. And a lot of times we break up the skeletal system into the axial skeleton and the appendicular skeleton. The axial skeleton, you'll see here, is the one shaded kind of the bluish here. That is basically the core of the body. Okay, I kind of think of it basically as if something happens to something in the axial skeleton, it's probably a big deal. Okay, you see the skull is part of that. The neck, spinal cord, ribs, everything inside of there is pretty important, whether it's the brain or the spinal cord or lungs, heart, things like that. So the axial skeleton is the main portion of your body. Okay, the appendicular skeleton is basically the appendages. Your appendages would be like we talked about before, your arms, legs, tail, antennas. Well, we don't have a tail, we don't have an antenna. But your arms and legs and everything that goes with it. So you see shoulders there, we got the hips and everything down. I kind of think of it as if something in your appendicular skeleton gets broken or hurt, you're probably going to live and be okay. Okay, if you break a leg or an arm or a finger, you're probably going to be okay. If you damage something in the axial skeleton, which is the main part, it's probably not going to be good for you. So that's kind of how I remember things. There are four basic bone shapes, and I wish I could pass around some examples to you like we would in class. But first of all, they have long bones, which is arms, legs, and fingers. So if you ever read something or hear someone talk about your long bones, they're talking about the long, skinny ones like your femur, which is from your hip to your knee. Okay, right here. Okay, or any of these here. Even your fingers, I know they're not real long, but they're long and skinny in shape. Okay, your short bones would be like your wrist and ankles. Okay, your wrists and ankles, and we'll look at this closer in the future here, but you have a bunch of little pebbles that kind of slide over each other. They're small bones that kind of clustered and slide over each other. So those would be considered short bones. Flat bones like your skull and your sternum here. Okay, those are consider your flat bones, and then irregular, which is basically like weird, goofy shaped. So like your vertebrae are a weird shape. Okay, your hips, okay, are a weird shape. So we call that your irregular shaped bones. There are different bone structures or different bone layers. We're not going to worry too much about this, but if you look, the periosteum is basically okay. It's pretty hard. It's where muscles attach. Okay, and then we have compact bone, which is the layer below that. Okay, it's pretty hard, and then in the middle we have spongy bone, which is it's a soft material, and there's like pockets, not air pockets, but pockets where marrow is going to be in there. So you see below, bone marrow fills the gaps between the spongy bone. So you kind of think of a sponge, and it fills with water, all the little air pockets. Well, that's kind of the same way there. Bone marrow is going to fill those. Maybe you've heard of someone have a bone marrow transplant, which basically means that if they have some sort of disease that affects the bone marrow, you can go in, and instead of like donating blood, if you're a match, they can go in here and scrape out some of that bone marrow, suck out some of that bone marrow, and inject it into the person with the disease or the cancer or whatever it is, and then they have healthy bone marrow. So bone marrow often makes blood in a lot of your bones. Bones of the cranium. Your cranial bones, your skull, okay, or cranium is not just one piece, but it's many pieces, what they call sutured together. Okay, if you look closely at this, and like I said, I have great examples of this. I wish I could pass these around, but they're kind of puzzle pieced together. Okay, so you'll see along here, there's different names for each one, but they're sutured together. They're kind of fused together. You guys are probably familiar with like babies. Like a baby has a soft spot right here, and there's also one towards the back here. Okay, so right here a baby has a soft spot when they're born, and right here. Well, the reason for that is because these bones, these cranial bones, are not fused together yet. So if they were fused together, there would be issues with the birth, because the baby has to fit through the birth canal. So it's kind of cool that their cranial bones aren't fused together, so it allows their head to be soft and to kind of like have a different shape, or kind of change shape a little bit, to pass through the birth canal. Once they're born, then over time, over a few months, then these skull bones will fuse together, and that soft spot will go away. When a baby's first born, you don't want to like drop it on its head, because there's basically not a whole lot protecting its brain, because its skull hasn't closed up yet. So, and a lot of babies, because they have the soft spot when they're born, like I know both of my kids, when they were born, they looked like they had cone heads, like long pointy heads, because when they passed through the birth canal, their head was kind of misshapen, because the skull wasn't solid yet. So you have these cranial bones, and you can kind of see how they're all fused together. Occipital, temporal. Maybe got hit in the temple before, and it kind of hurts. Okay, well, that's kind of a weak spot in your skull, because you see right here, there's 4 bones that are all kind of sutured together. They all kind of meet there. So you've maybe heard of that before. Going on, your maxilla and mandible. Your maxilla is your upper jaw here, so where your top teeth are would be your maxilla. Your bottom teeth would be your mandible. Okay, so if someone says stop flapping your mandible, that means you're probably talking a lot. Your mandible's going up and down. Okay, and you see the maxilla is connected to your orbital bones here, so it's all kind of fused together until you think of a skull as one bone, but it's really many bones fused together. As we move down, we're just going to kind of go through some examples of some bones here, and kind of talk about examples. But your clavicle, maybe you've heard of your collarbone. Maybe someone has broken their collarbone. Is usually that's a fairly common thing. A lot of people I've heard of like fallen down the stairs and broken their collarbone, their clavicle. Clavicle is the fancier word for it, but it's going to hold your shoulder to the rest of your upper body, so it connects here, okay, kind of to your shoulder here, and then it also connects right here underneath your neck. You can actually feel it right at the top of your rib cage. There's like a little hole, like a little indent. You can go ahead and feel it if you want. Okay, and then there's a bump on one side. Well, that's the head of your clavicle. If you feel the other way, there's the head of your other clavicle. But there's that spot in the middle where there's nothing. That's where your clavicle meets. So it's only as thick as like your pinky finger. So it's not the world's strongest bone. It's not uncommon for people to break these. If you're a Packers football fan, Aaron Rodgers breaks his clavicle like every other year. The last time he did, I think they were playing the Vikings, and he landed, and like a large 300-pound man fell on top of him, and he fell on his shoulder and broke his clavicle. And I believe they went in and they put a plate in there and some screws to kind of hold it together so it won't break as easily in the future, because he had broken it 2 or 3 times before. But so your clavicle right here. As we go on, your scapula. Your scapula is your shoulder blade. Okay, so this is kind of a rear view here. Okay, some of you guys can maybe do the thing with your shoulder blades where you kind of they're really flexible. You can kind of point them. Okay, that's your shoulder blade, your scapula. It's located on the back side of your rib cage and helps provide part of your shoulder joint and movement for your arms. So it's kind of a big flat piece, and this connects here up at the shoulder. I really wish we were in class, because I have a bunch of these examples that I could pass around, everyone could look at. But as we get to the vertebrae, your vertebral column or your spinal cord, they break up your vertebrae, your backbones, into 3 regions. Your cervical, your thoracic, and your lumbar. So if we start at the neck bones there would be your cervical vertebrae. These are smaller. If you look at overall, they kind of get bigger as they go down. These are smaller. Your neck is usually smaller than your lower back. Doesn't need to be as strong because it's only holding your head. You know, as you get down to your lower back, it's supporting everything above it. So these are smaller, kind of finer, and there are 7 of them that connect there. Most mammals have 7. It's kind of crazy, but like giraffes have 7 vertebrae in their neck. So I know their necks are crazy long, but there's still only 7 bones in their neck. They're just really, really big cervical vertebrae. So you have your cervical, your thoracic. I remember when we talked about insects, their thorax is their chest. Okay, your thoracic region is this middle section right here. There are 12 of those here. Okay, they're thicker than cervical vertebrae, and there's 12 there, thoracic. And then the bottom part here would be your lumbar. These are really thick. There's only 5 of them, and they need to support everything above them. So that's why they're so thick. You maybe have done this before, where you if you've noticed, like if you've been riding in the front seat of a car, there's a little like knob that you can twist, and maybe like if you have a sibling that was twisting it while you were sitting there, it feels weird on your back. That's the lumbar support, okay, on your chair, and it'll either push into your back or release off your back. Basically, I'm giving your lumbar, they call it the lumbar support because it's your lower back region, and it'll give you more or less support right here where you're sitting. So the same thing on those, like my chair in school has the little lumbar support that gives it more or less support. So there are 3 sections of vertebrae here, and I always kind of remember it as how many there are. So there are 7 cervical, 12 thoracic, and 5 lumbar. And I remember it as, what time do most people eat? And I know there's exceptions, but most people eat breakfast at 7, they eat lunch at 12, and they eat dinner at 5. So that's how I remember it. 7, 12, 5. Let's see here. Why don't we stop right here, and we'll just kind of pick up where we'll leave off for tomorrow.